All right, let's jump right in. Today we're talking about something called Narketpally syndrome. And first things first, I need you to just throw out everything you think you know about the word syndrome, because this isn't about a disease, not at all. It's a philosophy, a really radical new way of knowing in medicine that got its start in a place called Narketpally, India.
So let's just start right there with that huge question. What if a syndrome wasn't some neat little box of symptoms you diagnose, but something else entirely? This one idea completely flips the script, you know? It moves us away from a static label and towards seeing things as a dynamic, flowing process.
To really get this, we've got to go way back to the word's original meaning. The folks behind this philosophy reclaimed the ancient Greek and Sanskrit roots of syndrome. And you know what they found? It doesn't mean pathology. It means together we flow, or collective movement. It's all about connection, about branching out and seeing how things are interconnected.
So that's the absolute core of it, right? Narketpally syndrome is a philosophy of connection. It's not afraid to lean into the complexity, the messiness of real life. And that stands in total contrast to a lot of traditional science that tries to isolate one little variable at a time, often stripping away the very context that defines a person's illness.
Okay, so a philosophy is great, but how do you actually use it, right? How do you make it practical? Well, it's built on what they call a flowing river ecosystem of real hands-on tools.
To make that whole together we flow idea a reality, they built this living, breathing ecosystem. It's basically a set of interconnected digital tools all designed to capture and share knowledge in a way that truly reflects the complexity of a real patient's story. The whole ecosystem is really built on two main tools. First up, you've got CBBLE, which they call Cable. Think of it like a private 24/7 social network just for doctors and students to share and discuss real patient cases whenever they need to. Then there's the PaJR, the Patient Journey Record. And this isn't your standard clinical chart. It's more like a secure, living digital story of an illness, something that's built together by the care team and the patient.
Now, this whole system didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It grew, it evolved. And they've got this great mountain climbing analogy to explain it. You start at base camp, which was Web 0.0, just simple offline notes. Then you establish shared camps higher up. That's Web 2.0, using things like online wikis and shared records. And now they're aiming for the summit, which is Web 3.0, using AI and blockchain to connect all that data, find hidden patterns, and maybe even predict what's coming next.
And this, right here, this is maybe the most important takeaway. The tools are cool, for sure, but they serve a much bigger purpose. This is an epistemological shift. It's not just about a tech upgrade, it's an upgrade in how we think about medical knowledge itself, about how we know what we know.
So this new way of knowing really highlights two totally different ways of seeing medicine. And they have this amazing metaphor for it: canopy walkers versus root walkers. First, you've got population-based thinking. This is the big picture view, right? It's driven by massive clinical trials, journal clubs, all that structured data from thousands and thousands of patients. It's all about finding the general rules, the efficiencies. It's a very top-down way of looking at things.
To really get a feel for this, picture this. A huge herd of wild beasts needs to cross a dangerous river. A big clinical trial might compare two different crossing paths and find that one is, say, 20% safer. That's the relative risk, and that's usually the number that makes the headlines.
But, and this is the crucial part, the Narketpally perspective asks a different question. What about the absolute risk? How many actual wildebeests didn't make it? Because if 500 drown on one path and 400 drown on the other, that 20% difference still means 100 individuals made a choice that was life or death. For the one wildebeest, it's not a statistic.
And that brings us right to this core difference. You've got your canopy walkers. They're up high in the treetops, looking down at the whole forest. They're focused on efficiency, on guidelines, on doing things right. Then you have the root walkers. They're on the ground, kneeling beside each individual tree. They're focused on the unique story, the context, and doing the right thing for that one person.
And you can really see the power of this root walker thinking when you look at actual patient stories. In one case, it helped a family realize their daughter's panic attacks weren't random. They were all tangled up in this complex, unspoken neighborhood stress. In another, it traced a man's rigid neck, which was first dismissed as being all in his head, to high levels of fluoride in the local water. That's context the view from the canopy would have completely missed.
So you might be wondering, how on earth do you train doctors to be both a canopy walker and a root walker? How do you teach them to see deeper like that? Well, it takes a totally different kind of educational philosophy.
The first piece of the puzzle is this idea called pedagogy,
I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is pretty simple. It's self-determined learning. The focus isn't just on what students learn, but how they learn it. It's about empowering them to ask their own questions and lead their own investigations.
The other half of this is critical realism. This is a philosophy that basically says reality has layers. Beneath the surface-level events we can all see, like symptoms, there are deeper, often invisible structures and mechanisms that are the real cause of what's happening. The goal is to understand those hidden drivers. And here's where the magic happens. When you put those two ideas together, you get something really powerful. Critical realism fosters humility. You accept that there's always more to the story than what you see. But pedagogy makes sure that humility turns into action, into an active inquiry. It constantly challenges learners to connect those visible dots to the invisible structures underneath.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. This is not some easy fix. There's this massive hurdle they call philosophical inertia. I mean, think about it. Traditional medical schools often prioritize getting the right answer on an exam over deep critical questioning. The system itself can push back against this kind of change.
So, with all that in mind, where is this all heading? What's the future look like? This is where we get into AI, ethics, and this really important idea of cognitive justice. In this system, all those patient stories captured in the PaJR, they're not just seen as anecdotes anymore. They're reframed as deep phenotypes. Think of them as incredibly rich, layered, unfolding data sets that an AI can actually learn from. This allows for an AI approach called case-based reasoning, where the system learns to solve new problems by looking at similar stories from the past. Okay, so let's pull all these pieces together. If you want the key signposts of Narketpally syndrome, here they are. It all starts with the philosophy of together we flow. It's put into practice with the patient journey record and the CBBLE ecosystem. The learning engine is critical realist pedagogy. It looks to the future with AI-driven reasoning. It's defined by that tree metaphor of canopy and root walkers, and its ultimate goal is cognitive justice. And that brings us to the ultimate ethical vision here. The core call is for all systems in medicine, whether they're human or artificial, to be transparent so we can see why they make the decisions they do, syndromic so they always embrace that interconnected together we flow idea, and fundamentally ethical, which means promoting what they call cognitive justice, the idea of co-creating knowledge with patients, not just dictating it to them from on high. So what this all does is reframe our whole idea of medical knowledge, not as some static fact in a textbook, but as a dynamic river, one that's constantly flowing and being enriched by every single patient's journey. And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. If healing is really about bearing witness to these complex stories, then what story are you witnessing today, in your own life or your work, and how might it be part of a much bigger, flowing whole that you just haven't seen yet?